Funding provided by Hydrite Chemical Company. We salute all of our veterans for their service to our country. We wish to say thank you for your selfless dedication and sacrifice to preserve our freedom.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Black Nouveau. I'm Joanne Williams. This week we're going to profile 3 Wisconsin veterans whose service to our country went well beyond their active military duty. Even before the United States was a nation, African Americans fought and gave their lives for the freedoms that this country often denied them. From the Revolutionary War through World Wars I and II, black men and women fought for this country, often in segregated units. In 1948, President Harry Truman, under pressure from A. Philip Randolph and other civil rights leaders, signed Executive Order 8891. It abolished racial discrimination in the armed services. That would eventually lead to the end of segregated units in the military. Paul Washington served in the Korean conflict, the first war after Truman's executive order was given. He says that for him, race was not an issue. He joined with a bunch of his buddies, black and white, and said when he got overseas, he had no problems. He said, "I was like anybody else."
I was one of the ones that was involved in initiating those plates. This was back in the 60s. And I wound up getting Vet 5. The state commander at that time wound up getting Vet 1.
When he got this special license plate, Paul Washington had not yet become state commander of the Disabled American Veterans. That would come a decade later, but he is proud of hanging Vet 5 plates on his car and displays his patriotism just as strongly with the stickers and signs that decorate the back hatch.
Well, being it's an SUV and it's easy to advertise.
Yeah, right.
I'd rather advertise veteran stuff than political stuff, as you can see.
It says still serving America. Do you consider yourself still serving America?
That's right. I do. With working with other veterans and helping other veterans out.
Paul Washington, a native of Madison, Wisconsin, served 18 months in Korea. He arrived in 1953 near the end of the war.
After graduating from high school, went into the service.
Did you volunteer to go?
Volunteered to go because I knew we were going to be drafted. There were 6 of us that went.
Take me back to when you volunteered to go into the Army, right?
Right.
Why did you volunteer, and do you remember your first day of induction?
Oh, yes. My first day, the gentleman that talked us into it, he was in the reserves, or National Guard. He was in Ace was in the National Guard. And we all hung out at this center. You know, it was a place that the kids, that all of us went to on the weekend. They had dancing, the pool tables and everything. It was downtown, across from the old post office. And Ace sort of talked us into it because we figured we were going to get drafted anyway. They were still drafting at that time. So he talked us into it. We reported down there at the center. That's where we went. He walked with us to the bus. We got on the bus and went to Milwaukee, and we got our physicals and everything. And after that, we went to Fort Sheridan. And then from Fort Sheridan, went to Maryland and did basic training there. And from there, I went to ordnance school, and I got involved in explosives. Back then, doing that and going overseas, the money, the money was good. It was extra pay for doing that type of a job. So what the heck? I was young, I was 18, and it was extra money. to do that kind of work. So it was sent up where they wanted to send me.
Yeah.
And that's where I wound up going. Because of my MOS and the amount of time and experience that I wound up getting, the transfer wouldn't go through. They said, no, we need you up front. We had sniper fire at us periodically from the hills. Matter of fact, the first day I got into Yongdong Po, I was at it was a school, an old school. That's where some of us were staying until we were, shipped up. And I was out in the yard talking to one of the cooks. We got into conversation and that. And all of a sudden, a couple bullets whizzed by us from up in the hills. See, they can see up in the hills because we were down. So, but that's things like that will happen. You got, and you don't know exactly who's doing it. You know it's a Korean, but you don't know, what the situation. So you got to be very careful and cautious. I carried a carbine all the time.
Washington was sent to Korea just as the fighting supposedly stopped, but the dangers of war were still there.
I was a landmine sweeper.
And you missed one?
Well,
or you found one?
Yeah, we found one. One of the guys, two of them died. I got injured. The six of us that were mine sweeping. This was after the war was over. Well, so we were more or less cleaning up towards the front, up to 2nd Division area. I was in 8th Army.
Do you remember that day?
Somewhat. I try not to. I don't talk much about it.
Korea has been called the Forgotten War, and soldiers coming home in the 1950s did not get the welcome of a grateful country that more recent vets see. When you came home, what kind of reception did you get?
Not like the reception I got when I was on the flight and came back. I didn't let my folks know that I was coming back or when I would arrive. They were surprised when I got to the front door. Back then, there was no big reception. That's the reason why we do things now.
The things he does now is serve other veterans when they come home.
This is my DAV, my past department commander hat or cap when I was state commander in 71, 72. I just want to, be involved volunteering, doing things. I'm the first black DAV state commander in Wisconsin.
And helping to organize and take the honor flight to visit the Korean War Memorial.
This is the best return, better than when I actually came back from Korea. The Korean War, that was real touching.
The memorial?
I have some pictures of that, yeah. I could see myself. The statues and the circle hit me more than anything, because I could see myself. Yeah.
While women in the military share a history of discrimination based on gender, black women have faced both race and gender discrimination. Initially barred from duty, black women persistently fought for their right to serve. No documented records have been found of black women's military service in the Revolutionary War, but it's believed that some served alongside black men. We do have documentation of black women assisting Union soldiers during the Civil War. 5 black nurses served aboard the hospital ship Red Rover. Susie King Taylor, Civil War nurse, cook, and laundress, was raised in slavery but worked for the Union Army. She was able to read and write and held school for black children and soldiers. She chronicled her Civil War adventures and after the war established a school for freed slaves. At the beginning of World War I, Many black nurses enrolled in the American Red Cross, hoping to get into the Army or Navy Nursing Corps. A few were included shortly after the armistice was signed. By 1919, the nurses had been released from service. In January 1941, the Army opened its nurse corps to 56 black women. But black women did more than serve as nurses in World War II. The 6888th Women's Army Corps, a postal unit, was the first of its kind to serve overseas during the war. Following World War II, racial and gender discrimination persisted in the military, but changing racial policies opened new doors for black women. During the Korean and Vietnam Wars, black women took their places in the war zones. In 1964, Margaret E. Bailey became the first black nurse promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Army Nurse Corps. She would later become the first black colonel. In 1979, Hazel W. Johnson would become the first black woman general and the first African American chief of the Army Nurse Corps. In today's military, women do more than serve as nurses. They represent almost 20% of our nation's military force, and black women now make up more than 30% of the women in the military.
Here we go again. Same old stuff again.
The National Guard is the nation's reserve military force that dates back to colonial militias. Its members serve part-time unless mobilized for active duty in times of war or state and national emergencies like Hurricane Katrina.
I got into the service when I was 17 because I was following my sister's footsteps. She had also done the same thing, Sergeant Tarina Hammock, and prior to her, my brother was in the Coast Guard. So, and then we had some other family members that were also veterans as well. But those two resonate the most to me because they were more closer to me, and it was just something that I felt that I should do. And I looked into it, I researched it, and I found out that once you turn 17, that you could enlist. And so that's what I did. My mom and my dad asked me, "Are you sure?" I said, "I am sure." So I went ahead with it, and I don't regret it to this day.
Birdie Cowser joined the National Guard before she graduated from high school.
I went into the Wisconsin Army National Guard because I wanted opportunities for myself. My parents had quite a bit of children, and so I wanted to make it easier for them, and I wanted to position myself to go to college, to travel the world, to see different things, to meet different people, and just understand the culture of other people. When I went into the service, it was 1993. I was a junior at Washington High School, and I went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And then I came back for my senior year, graduated from Washington High School, and then I went for my advanced individual training, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia. And soon after that, I went to Montgomery, Alabama to start my first year in college at Alabama State University.
During her 16 years in the Guard, she made the most of her opportunities.
Some of those opportunities is just the discipline that the military instills in you. And I don't want to discredit my family or anything like that because they were very instrumental in my life as well. But the military, it really just brought something out of me. You know, those fears that I would normally have because I was in the military, I no longer had those fears. And so that was just something that was very important to me. And I was able to basically show my family that although I might be scared of heights, I can still rappel. So that's why some of the things that I felt was important of going to the military.
And she took advantage of some educational opportunities.
The service did play in higher education for me because, again, it allowed me to reap some of those military educational benefits so that my parents would not have to pay out of their pocket. So I was a candidate for the GI Bill, which I did take advantage of, and I just continued my education, and currently I hold 2 master's degrees, and I'm just thankful because but for the military, maybe I would have not had those opportunities. My most significant position in the military was becoming an Army officer, and I was commissioned in 1999 as a quartermaster officer. At that time, I became the platoon leader of a company out in Sussex, Wisconsin, and that was was really an eye-opener for me, because the motto for officers is work smarter rather than harder. So I really enjoyed the leadership positions that I was exposed to being an Army officer.
She speaks highly about her years in the service, but admits that there were problems.
And being an African-American female, I found that I had to always do maybe twice as much as my counterpart, which I found to be very offensive and very demeaning. I can just remember when I would go in, uniforms pressed, boots professionally shined, and then my counterpart just came. It's like they just rolled out of bed and just came to work. And it seemed like those individuals always received the perks or the incentives or the credit, because I took that experience or that negative experience and I turned that into a positive. And I needed to understand that as an African American female and one of the few ones in the Wisconsin Army National Guard, that I needed to make a statement. I needed to be that person that was definitely spit shined together, standing tall and looking good. I needed to be that person for somebody else to look up to and for them to understand that if she can do it, I definitely can do it.
What are some of the things that you have learned since you've been here at Vets Place Central?
I learned that me personally, I can't do everything myself.
Cowser uses the skills she learned in the service in her current position.
The job that I currently do today at the Center for Veterans Issues is the Bureau Director of Program and Transitional Housing Services. I am the person that oversees the transitional housing programs and the permanent supportive services for Center for Veterans Issues. Some of the barriers that the veterans face upon returning from a conflict is that when they get back, their life is totally different. Ultimately, they're not the same person that left that's coming back. And so then the families that are still here, when this new person comes back, they don't know how to really kind of handle that relationship. And so then the family, that mechanism, that thing that was together, it starts to break down. It starts to not be so important anymore. And then it doesn't allow that person to really establish who they are. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. It's just they're a different person.
She views her work as service.
It allows me to be a servant leader. It's one thing to be a leader, but if you can be a servant leader, I think that you can grasp more as to what the community needs and how you can impact the community. I mean, it's very important to come in and have and be able to be a change agent for the community. So I really take my job very seriously. I'm committed to what I do. I'm dedicated to what I do. And when I wake up in the morning, I never dread coming to work.
The Vietnam War divided America more than any other war in the 20th century. Many people questioned why it was necessary to risk American lives overseas, especially since there was a battle for civil rights going on in our own country. Vietnam saw the highest percentage of black troops to serve in an American war. Blacks were 11% of the population, 13% of the military, and 15% of the war casualties. Draft numbers were more disproportionate. 1 of every 3 eligible white males was drafted. For black men, 2 of every 3 received their greetings from Uncle Sam. William Sims found himself a part of those statistics.
Vietnam was in the back of my mind, but I didn't never think that I would be the one to be going there.
In 1965, the United States sent its first combat troops to Vietnam. William Sims was among the many African Americans to be drafted into the war.
I had gotten a letter, quite naturally, like everyone that had gotten a letter when they were drafted, that your friends and neighbors had selected you to represent them in the service. Yeah. So it was somewhat of a shock to me, quite naturally. And then the thing that I thought about, which was hilarious, as they say, your friends and neighbors. I said, what kind of friend did I have to do something like this to me? I felt that when I signed up for Airborne, that was going to take me to a different setting. I didn't realize, seriously, I was somewhat naive, I guess. I just didn't realize that I would be shipped to Vietnam until I saw the orders on the poster.
Sims' original orders took him to Fort Knox, Kentucky. He was in the infantry. He spent time in Fort Gordon and Fort Benning in Georgia before being transported to Hawaii on his way to Vietnam. But he caught pneumonia and spent 2 weeks in the infirmary.
I understood that they were getting me well to send me to the front. So and I'm thinking, I said, well, gee, at this time, am I going to be able to survive something like this, I'm just getting over here, and I got pneumonia, and here it is, these guys, wounded and stuff. So it was somewhat a harrowing experience.
For part of his tour, he had to wear prescription sunglasses because his regular glasses broke and he couldn't get new ones. That didn't sit well with one of his commanding officers.
I had a racist platoon sergeant that thought it was funny. So he, first time, he put me in point. He put me on point. And I was telling him, I said, why would you do this to me? I can't hardly say. Well, I was it was an open field, I guess he said that was cool.
To be on point means to take the first and most exposed position in a combat military formation.
So he would find time to send me on point sometime at night. I don't know why, but he did it. But anyway, it ended up that he got killed on one of those ambushes. And I never did really regret, because I was bitter. I was bitter with him. But me being a PFC, what could you do? Either that, or they can put you in the brig, those little threats. And then me being a draftee too. See what I'm saying? It was different. These guys, we're RAs and all that, and you're a draftee. You can be, spendable and stuff. Yeah, well, I didn't like that type of thing. Anyway.
Sims remembers his fiercest battle in getting wounded.
So at the time, the lieutenant says, well, Sims, seeing as how you here, you take point. I said, oh, here it goes. I knew he was going to do that, take point. Yes, sir. So we had this young guy who was about 19 years old, back of me. He was so anxious to prove himself, So he breaks through this bush. Big line of bushes there. He breaks through the bush, and then I hear him, "Ow!" That's all I heard him say, "Ow!" And I said, that's strange. So I walks a few feet, and I said, I'm going through this bush. I went through the bush, and sure enough, the guy. I said, oh, we receiving fire, and he was laying on the ground, and then all hell seemed to break loose on our right flanks. The machine gun started opening up, and then I said, oh my goodness, and then I started seeing a lot of action on the left flank. I said, oh man, what's happening? And then it seems like everything broke loose then. The guy had thrown a grenade on me. He had thrown a grenade, and when I seen it coming, I dropped my head, and it bounced by my leg, and it blew my leg up. But I had my boot so tight that just a little sliver went through there, okay? And it was a hole under my, and I thought I had lost my leg really because I was scared to look at first. I said, oh, I said, oh my goodness. And then I looked, and then I saw that my leg was there, and then I was feeling my leg. I said, oh man, my leg's here, okay? So then I looked, and then I seen that little sliver, okay? I said, oh, but I didn't feel nothing because it was like a tourniquet, okay? And then I looked, and then it was a scrape there that a piece of shrapnel went in and scraped out. But that was the only thing I had. But the grenade had bounced me, and I seen it bouncing towards me, and I just turned my head, and it bounced by my leg, and boom, my legs went up. I said, oh my goodness, I lost my leg. But that was the only thing that happened.
Sims was hospitalized and sent back to the United States. When you came back then to the United States, how were you received?
I had mixed feelings about the whole thing, really. But it was so fast, you know what I mean? As I said, being drafted and not thinking that, hey, man, you're going to be in some place, and then all of a sudden you're back here, and then you're looking at, well, I'm going to get out and continue my education or whatever I'm going to do. I found that a number of veterans are being mistreated just because of how the country felt about the war. And we knowing that, hey, nobody wants to be in no war, I don't think. I wouldn't think nobody wants to be in a war.
He met Thomas Wynn, a Korean veteran in charge of an experimental program at UWM. The program was designed to help veterans get admission to the university. Wynn left UWM to start an organization to empower and educate veterans about their benefits, housing, education, and economic development. Sims was part of the original group.
Well, when we first started, we started with the Interested Veterans of the Central City. That was the name of the organization. And then in 1973, we opted to change the name to the National Association for Black Veterans. Our mission was to educate low-income and minority veterans as it relates to their benefits, housing, education, rehabilitation, and economic development. We deal with mainly minority veterans, women, and the issues of today, especially some of the issues that's concerned about the mental health of veterans. After serving a number of different tours, we definitely know that they have some problems. People tend to forget that we come from the civilian population, so we have the same issues or more. And besides 4 or 5 tours of duty on our mind that we have to address, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that.
In 1988, NABVETS was certified as a national veterans organization and has provided services to over 65,000 veterans through 95 chapters across the country. It still has a strong presence in Milwaukee, providing shelter, counseling, and employment services. William Sims is currently its president.
Everything that we have today in terms of our freedoms, I think we owe that to the veteran. People need to be a little bit more sensitive to the ones that give their all and what they've given for this country.
And that's our program for this week. For Black Nouveau, I'm Joanne Williams. Thank you to all veterans and active military who stand to defend our nation. Good night.
Funding provided by Hydrite Chemical Company. We salute all of our veterans for their service to our country. We wish to say thank you for your selfless dedication and sacrifice to preserve our freedom.